Welcome back to my video series on the Kowa spoke cutter. This will be a two-part segment on using the micro adjuster. The micro adjuster is used to set the spacing of pressure on the dies in order to get the threads that we want when we roll our spokes. When using the micro adjuster, you need some tools and supplies. You need some magnifying glasses, 4 times, 6 times, 8 times, your choice. You need a digital caliper with a zero function. You also need some supply of spokes. You need spokes that are 2.00 millimeters in diameter. Typically DT Swiss, Sapine. These are Sapines. These will work for the job. You also need a supply of spokes that are 1.98 millimeters in diameter. A lot of your mid-grade and entry-level spokes will say they're 14 gauge, will say they're 2.0 spokes, but they're really not. They're 1.98 millimeters in diameter. And if you think I'm kidding, well, I'll demonstrate for you. Here is a Sapine. And it shows 2.0 on the caliper. That's a Sapine. And then here we have a mid-grade CN spoke from Taiwan, which I import and use for basic wheel build. It's 1.98. So that is something you need to be aware of when you're setting your die spacing or die pressure using the micro adjuster. So what are our targets? Well, let's zoom in on this paper right here. Give a little bit of angular tilt. Our target is on the left-hand side first. This is the primary target. Using Sapine or DT Swiss, a spoke that is 2.00 millimeters in diameter, my target is to have a diameter of 2.21 millimeters to 2.23 millimeters, or a 2.22 millimeter average. And what am I looking at when I'm measuring the diameter of the threads that I'm rolling? On flat threaded spokes, approximately the half of the threads that are towards the end. That's where I'm checking the diameter. I want to have it so that when I roll out multiple spokes, I'm getting an average of 2.22 millimeters diameter on the end. On my Kowa spoke cutter, my threads are angled, so I'm measuring the last 2, 3, maybe 4 threads on the end. Again, looking for the same target, 2.21 millimeters diameter to 2.23 millimeters diameter, or a 2.22 millimeter diameter average. That's my target. Now the nice thing is that when you use this as your primary target, you will automatically cover the mid-grade and entry-level spokes that have a diameter of 1.98 millimeters. Because when you roll these through this setup, you will get 2.19 millimeters to 2.21 millimeters, or an average of 2.20 millimeters diameter on the defined threads that you're checking. In other words, when you set up the Kowa correctly to do this one, it will automatically cover this one. You do not want to set your aiming targets with a 198 millimeter spoke, because when you do that and later on you try to roll through a 2.0 millimeter spoke, you could run into issues. In other words, if you try to take a CN spoke and set it to 2.23 or 2.22, and you go back later and try to run through a Sapine or DT, it might jam or run rough. So set up for a 2.00 millimeter spoke first, and when you roll your 198s through, they should go through just fine. Let's zoom out a little bit. Let's look at this paper. When I use the micro adjuster, what am I doing? I'm unlocking the short block with the static die. I'm dropping the gauge knob down a little bit. I'm setting my micro adjuster, locking it, bringing the knob back up gently and locking the block again. That's what I'm doing over and over. So how do I start off? I unlock the block, I drop the knob down a little bit, and I set the micro adjuster to the minimum, such that when I bring the knob up, it's barely touching the knob. And I bring the knob up gently. Never slam the knob or you're going to damage it. So I set the adjuster to the minimum, bring the knob up gently against it, lock the block. And that's where I start. If I get a smooth roll when I roll the spoke, and I get something that looks like this, double mountains with even spacing between, nothing else, that's a good start. So what will I do? I will unlock the block, drop the knob down a little bit, turn the micro adjuster a quarter turn, a half turn, a full turn, lock it in place, bring the knob back up gently, and lock the lower block again. Roll the spoke through. If I get a smooth roll and I start seeing plateaus that are evenly spaced and not skewed with nothing else in between, that's progress. That's good. So I will tighten up the micro adjuster some more. I'll unlock the block, lower the knob, tighten the adjuster another quarter turn, half turns, full turns, a judgment call. A little bit of trial and error. Bring the knob back up, lock that block, and keep on repeating this. The moment I get a smooth roll and I start seeing nice little rounded hills with nothing else in between, nice and clean, no skewing, that's pretty close. Well, this is what happens to someone who's really lucky. However, unfortunately, sometimes it doesn't go well. Sometimes you get a rough roll and you get something like this. Plateaus with like a little thread in between, or split nubs, fractured nubs, or plateaus that are skewed one way, or hills that are skewed one way. You get something that does not look like these. When you get a rough roll and you see something like that, that means you need to make a micro adjustment. That is, you're going to unlock the block, drop the knob a little bit, and turn your micro adjuster maybe a 1/16 of a turn and lock it. Bring the knob back up gently and lock your block. And then roll the spoke through again. If you continue to get a rough roll and see this kind of thing, then you have to repeat that small turn of the micro adjuster until you get out of that. Your goal is that when you keep doing this, you'll get out of here and arrive back at here. Smooth roll and this, or this. Once you're here, rounded hills, nice and clean, nothing else in between, no skewing, you're very close, and it won't be long before you're at the target for a 2.00 millimeter spoke. You're almost to that point where you're at 2.21 millimeters to 2.23 millimeters, or a 2.22 millimeter average when you check the diameter of those end threads. This is the process. So once again, when you're setting the spacing or pressure on your Kowa spoke cutter, you're using the micro adjuster to do it. And what you're doing every time is you're unlocking the lower block, pulling the knob down a little bit, making a micro adjuster adjustment, usually tightening, and locking it down. You're bringing the knob back up gently and locking that block. And you're doing that over and over. Hoping to see this most of the time. Doing small adjustments to get out of this, back over to here. And again, your goals are, when using a 2 millimeter spoke, your goal is to have it such that your well-defined threads on the end come out with an average of about 2.22 millimeters diameter when measured on a digital caliper with a zero function. That's it for part 1 of this segment on using the micro adjuster. Part 2 coming up very soon.